From the hot bathtub scene between the king and queen that had us blushing, to the almost robotic sequences between Lord and Lady Danbury. Here's the steamiest, sexiest, and spiciest choreography from Bridgerton once more. This time featuring it on Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. And you and I are going to do a deep dive into them all. You've got to start with the iconic couple, the king and queen. And boy, did they have chemistry. From the bathtub scene to the dinner table, with all the servants scrambling to get away, the two of them had some pretty intense moments, didn't they? Well, to get that perfect combination of steamy and tense, intimacy coordinators were present on the set of Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, and the first step to filming these personal sequences was to open conversations with the director and the coaches. Also, you guys wouldn't know, but even when some of those interactions are only a few seconds long on screen, they can take up to hours to shoot. So, at the end of the day, our Queen Charlotte actress, India, says, it's all about teamwork. They consider it all together as what the entire sequence is trying to say. What message are they sending? And after they've answered that, it's organized like a trick or a dance. From the moment that dance begins, they know where each hand or leg will go exactly. And how they expect things to go from there because of the planning and the intimacy directors, it's extremely well orchestrated with only one goal in mind: to make both of our actors as comfortable as they can be, because that's what it comes down to, right? Trusting your scene partner, understanding their limits, and deciding when and where you feel comfortable being touched. So far, the franchise has done just that. With both the parent show and the prequel, when Bridgerton came out in Christmas 2020, it added a much-needed sparkle to the time it was set in. It took us on a whirlwind with the romance, the clothes, and of course, the sex. It's tricky business putting up one steamy performance after another, and the one thing that's helped the show to keep doing what it does: our favorite, Lady Danbury, played by Adjoa Andoh, had some insight on the whole thing as well. Looking back on her own career's revealing sex scenes, she called them collaborative and painstakingly orchestrated. But it was also pretty clear that back then, you just sort of dived in and got on with it. For her, everything had always been extremely practical, and there wasn't anything sleazy about it. Despite that, she also knows that not everyone had the same experience. Andoh says that while the actors felt secure, she always hoped that their sequences had the intimacy and passion that you would want to be communicating to your audience. And somehow, she always felt that it lacked that spark. Well, I don't know about you guys, but the electricity on this show was sizzling. Still, they faced criticism too, typically older male performers who claim that over-planning sex scenes kills any spontaneity or spark. But then again, one person's excitement can lead to another's discomfort, right? So, for her, the older actors, boomers like you kids call it now, have to step up. And that's exactly what our girl, Adjoa, did. But our king and queen weren't the only ones who saw some action, right? Brimsley and Reynolds were the first queer couple to flaunt their romance on the show, and their action scenes weren't that far behind the royal couples. When it was their moment to shine, you guys have no idea how these two managed everything. Brimsley, played by Sam Clement, describes it as one of the most nerve-wracking days on set. He spoke up about what it was like to film one of the sex scenes, and why it was more than just being very physical. The actor said in an exclusive interview that although the sequence was heavily choreographed, it was crucial that the two made it appear as real as possible once the cameras started rolling. And man, the way they show passion. Sometimes it leads to collateral damage too. Yep, there were times when the two lover boys had to stop because Sam realized that he'd harmed Freddie's back by throwing him against the desk too hard. Whoops. So, it seems even with coordinators present on set, accidents happen sometimes. But Sam shared that the choreography without a doubt helps in the long run. Our boy Brimsley had a lot to say. He believes that Reynolds and Brimsley's intimacy is greater than just two people engaging in intense physical contact. And the man had the receipts to prove his claim. Their first steamy scene had 2.5 pages of notes attached to it, as it also featured a power struggle. So the actors knew that not only did they have to nail the choreography, but they also had to make sure they sent the right message with their little performance. In the midst of the two reaching for each other, they had to add a layer of, I have to get some answers out of you. The entire dynamic, which made the sequence that much better, also made it 10 times harder to film. Despite all that, he was full of praise for his intimacy supervisor Lizzie Talbot and her team for creating such a respectful and comfortable environment that allowed them to produce the kind of work that they did. The presence of their intimacy coordinators allowed the two of them to stay on the same page because it was a completely new experience for both Freddie and Sam. Besides, it's never just two people on screen. I mean, yes, that's all we see, but even on a closed set, there are still around 30 to 40 people there. So you have to be intimate and vulnerable in front of all of them. That alone can make anyone really anxious. It's your body. This is how you look. And you have to be okay with it. And while Sam has never been absolutely in love with his body, it was one of the greatest things about that experience, as it allowed him to feel less self-conscious about his appearance. Sam Clement, for one, found it extremely freeing. He emphasized that the sequences on screen were more than just the sex aspect of Brimsley and Reynolds' relationship. In broader terms, it adds to the depth that the couple shared. And since the two are good pals too, Sam believes it shows a natural chemistry between them that enhances it and makes it simpler for the two actors to nail their roles. But not every intimate scene was hot and steamy, right? Arsema Thomas, a new face in the industry, portrays a young lady Agatha Danbury, the best friend of the one and only Queen Charlotte. Now, while the woman we saw in Bridgerton was full of grace and had a quiet fire around her, we saw in Queen Charlotte a Bridgerton story. As a little girl, she had anything but fire in her life. It's obvious that her sexual life drew viewers' attention to Lady Danbury ever since the first time Thomas appeared on the screen. The character's younger self is first seen gazing off into space as her considerably older spouse, Lord Danbury, makes love to her. Rather mechanically, it's clear that she isn't enjoying herself at the least, and the fact that she immediately jumped into a hot, steaming bath afterwards says a lot. Now, while the sex scene was shot for comic purposes alone, intimacy instructors were still very much present, because Cyril, the Lord Danbury actor, and Arsma both were somewhat new to this environment, and for Thomas, they were really amazing. At the same time, despite being in the industry for a while now, Cyril had never worked with a coordinator before and found the whole thing to be a refreshing change. Plus, the dynamic between Lord and Lady Danbury isn't exactly unheard of. According to Arsma, the sex scenes between the two were not too far off from reality for her and many other women. It's something many of them can relate to and empathize with, so the actress felt proud to represent every aspect of the art of lovemaking. The good, the steamy, and the let's get it over with as well. When she first watched the scene, she laughed like everyone else, as it's so obvious that Agatha wasn't having any fun and that her pleasure is not high up on her list of priorities. But then she realized that for many women, it's the norm. Having sex is seen more as a means of childbirth than something pleasurable for the gals. The resentment her character feels stems from the fact that she spent over 20 years in that relationship, unable to be herself for just a minute of it. It's only after her husband dies does she realize that sex can be pleasurable or exciting even. But that's not the fun part either. Apparently, a bouncing ball was placed between Lady and Lord Danbury while they did the deed on camera. Yep, her head didn't hit the headboard that many times for no reason. And the intimacy coordinators were praised by Arsma too. She said that because of them, Cyril and her could make jokes whenever they yelled cut, because they had planned and choreographed the scene to the point where it was just funny. So, from the let's get it over with sequences between Lord and Lady Danbury to the hot bathtub scene between the king and queen that no one's going to forget anytime soon, this was every steamy sequence from Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story.